So this is my finalised pantograph, Pentarouter, sorry. So it's got all nicely painted up, lacquered, finished at the moment. Everything seems connected. There are a few little things that need to be fixed up, but it's pretty well done now. Just tiny things really that I can take on and off when I need. I'm shooting this video at home just for the final sort of video showing you the machine. So it's not the best setup of what I've got at home, just a few things like clamps, for example, I don't have here at home, so I'm doing the best I can with what I've got. So let me show you the pantograph in particular. So this is the mechanism that it uses to create those different shapes that what we need to cut those different joins in the workshop at times. It's set up at the moment just to cut a simple rebate, just so I can show the examples of what you can do with it. Mortise and tenon. So a tenon in particular is a really strong joint that we use a lot at work, and this machine should be able to cut them pretty quickly. And versatilely, like different shapes and that fairly easily as well, just a matter of changing the template out. So yeah, I considered putting a spring on this, but it's not too heavy at this height, so I'm thinking about leaving that out altogether. So moving on to the template holder here. Sorry for the lighting again, this is just from at home. If you can see these two grooves that I've put into the template holder, they're so that you can move the template wherever you need to, just by putting a couple of, if I show you the back, a couple of screws in the back here, just with a little block behind it, enables you to, you can take those off and move it sideways if you need to, or up and down as well, gives you that adjustment. Now I've put this board here which represents lines up with the actual bed. So where, if you were to put the bearing just on sitting on the top of this board here, the cutter should line up with the bed. And that should be the same no matter what cutter. As long as you've got a bearing that's exactly twice as big as your cutter, then it should line up the same each time. So the template holder and the pantograph system is all set up on this sliding table. As you can see there, I'm just moving this lever here simply to engage this forward and back. So the depth is quite large. Really the depth is limited by the length of your cutter. If you can get a long shank on your cutters, then you can get a lot more depth obviously, and if the cutter, the actual cutter head itself is smaller than the shank, then you will get less depth obviously, but if this is larger than the shank, then you can really cut all the way up to your mounting where it's mounted into the router there. There will be a cover on the top of this as well. I haven't installed that at the moment, just at home. So that's the table and the pantograph. As you can see, I've put a little ruler there just so that you can see exactly how far you're cutting, and that comes up to this block. Now this is one aspect I'm not really that happy with the pantograph, with the Pentarouter, is this little block. So this system seems to move fairly smoothly, but the way it's set up underneath this lever mechanism is not ideal. You can't get at that nut very easily. I mean, you just can't see what you're doing, that's the only problem. So it's not a major issue, it's just one of those little niggling things that's just not really that smooth to use. So yeah. Now onto the bed. So I've got my adjustable fence set up here. That's set up parallel with the bed. The bed is set parallel with the pantograph, so it should all cut fine. Now I've got some stock clamped in at the moment. As I said before, I only have my clamps, my home clamps at the moment. So if I was at work, I'd just use an F clamp for these, that'd be much better. I've got a couple of blocks here just because these G clamps aren't quite large enough to fit onto the stock. So they're just set up now so that it can hold it down properly, but F clamps would probably be better for this. However, I did plan in my drawings, I had a plan for a a clamp that slides into these holes here. You can get it to go in there. So it's supposed to slide into these holes, and I had this all nicely set up before, but it just wasn't doing the job. So that then just comes down and bites onto that. Now the problem is that, as you can see, it starts to wander sideways, and this rod just doesn't bite hard into that hole well enough. So I think the alternative there is going to be change this out to a thread and put a nut on the underside there, so you can adjust how high you want it, but that nut is going to be the thing that locks it into place there. This rod is clearly not doing its job properly in biting in there. I mean, that was always going to be the problem of, will it actually bite? I was hoping that the pressure from the clamp would sort of make it tilt, which would force it to bite in that hole, but just wasn't doing it. So I've left that out for now. That'll be something I'll tinker with, I imagine, over a little while. Just for the setup of the switch, so it's pretty easily set up. The switch here, we got the emergency stop and on-off switch here. So it wasn't too difficult to set that up. The switch was so much more expensive than I thought it would be. It was $90 for just that little switch there, which, you know, that's a quarter of the project in cost, really. That's you know, that's a quarter of the money's worth spent on just that little part there. But overall, I'm pretty happy with how that's set up. It's easy to get to, makes sense the way that it's set up. And just yesterday I finished putting on the steel mounting to the bottom. This was a sort of an afterthought. I was thinking, I need to have this on some, I don't want to carry it around, I want it to be set up on some sort of stand, and I didn't have a stand, and there was a problem with the block that sits underneath. This needed to move freely. So what sort of stand I needed, I ended up using this steel that I had lying around, and I cut a trench into the side here to allow that block to slide. I just realised just before when I was setting up that this hole where the pins slide through, it's going to allow a whole lot of sawdust down into there, so I need to cut a relief hole in underneath there to allow the sawdust to fall through, really, so it doesn't build up and cause problems. But yeah, so that's the setup. Obviously a few little issues, just particularly with the stand not being made yet. It's just actually sitting on a couple of chairs, which is fine at the moment, but you know, this will work sitting on a bench and that sort of thing as well. But having a stand there just makes it easy, so you can move straight over the machine. It's all ready to go. You can lock your stock in wherever you need, put your template in, and away you go. Yeah, so I think that's about it. Let's give it a whirl. So that's the joint I've just cut, just a tenon there. Pretty square all the way along, even straight, you know, there's no little bumps. There's one little nick here where I think I was cutting too much at once there. It's about maybe half the depth there, so that's not great, but other than that, I mean, that's just, I think, human error, taking too much off at once. You do still need to cut little bits at a time, just like with any router. If you're cutting too much, it does have a tendency to grab and pull, but in the machine setup like this, I think it minimises that potential to do that. So that's a fairly straightforward square cut. You could also do that on a table saw. It might take you a bit longer, but you could probably do a deeper cut. But the great thing about this machine is it's not limited to just a square tenon. I could make this shape into a triangle shape if I wanted to, a round shape, or multiple tenons cut at the same time, which is the good thing about it. Exactly how versatile it is a little bit less than what I was hoping for. I was actually hoping to cut, say, tenons in the shapes of letters, for example, or even do sign cutting perhaps. If you set up your stock sort of set up this way, you could cut your shapes into the side of a sign like that. But I mean, those sort of small detail things you might be able to do with a smaller bit. At the moment that's a 12mm bit, but the versatility is not quite as large, or the ability to do those smaller intricate things not quite as large. You're limited by the size of your cutter. You know, doing outside corners is easy, doing inside corners is hard because of the round shape to it, and obviously the larger the radius then the bigger the round. Smaller cutters would be better, but yeah, so not quite as versatile as I'd hoped, but still gets a lot of the jobs done that we need. Mortise and tenon's a major join, use that a lot. Good strong join, and usable for lots of different things.